So I feel like I've had guests on that have done a great job in breaking down just how fragile our economy really is, and just how bad it could get. Now, I hate being the guy out there who says, hey, I think there's something wrong, and then not give you the solutions and steps for you to get through it. I've searched high and low for someone I feel like is well-grounded and knows what they're talking about when it comes to preparing for an emergency. Well, finally, by asking around and doing a little bit of networking, I found that guy. His name is Marcello Surjopolos. Marcello is the business owner of Food Storage Depot, which is one of the largest emergency supply stores in the country. This guy lives and breathes this topic. On this episode, we get a little bit of background information on who Marcello is and how he got into emergency preparedness. We then talk about some of the challenges you could face in the near future that may force us into those kinds of emergency situations. We then move into the realm of solutions. Marcello then gives a quick explanation of the 7 principles of being prepared to just not survive, but to thrive in an emergency situation. Finally, at the end, he gives you, the listener, an opportunity to become better prepared. Now, I normally don't advertise on this podcast because I would never want you buying something I told you to and not having it be great. I break that rule on this episode. I have looked into Marcello's business and I've talked to him many times off the air and can fully endorse the goods and services he provides. All you need to do is click on the link in the description of this episode to sign up for a 5-day seminar with Marcello where he goes into a deep dive into how you can be better prepared to get through any emergency. That's next on this episode of the Mormon Renegade Podcast. So I just want to take a moment to thank you, the listener. When I started this podcast, I wasn't sure if anyone would really listen. Now, to my surprise, this thing has taken on a life of its own. And that's all due to you, the listener, spending your time here with me, and it means a great deal to me. Now, as a husband and father, I'm keenly aware of how important time is. It feels like there's just never enough of it. So when you are spending your time here listening to this podcast, I feel a responsibility to never waste your time. In that spirit, as this podcast has grown, I feel like I need to do you, the listener, justice. I want to continue to produce good content and upgrade the audio quality. That takes better equipment and better software, and that all takes money. Now, I've tried to advertise, but you'd be surprised. There's not a lot of people wanting to advertise on a Mormon Fundamentalist podcast. I know, surprising, right? Now, if you want to help support the podcast, you can do that one of 2 ways. The first is go over to MormonRenegade.com and hit the Donate tab. There you can make a one-time donation, or you can go ahead and set it up to be a monthly recurring donation. Your choice entirely. Now, option number 2, because I'm a capitalist, if you want to head on over to MormonRenegade.com, click on the store button, you're going to find that we've got some new swag out. We got some t-shirts, we have a tote, we have cell phone cases, water bottles, coffee cups. We got a bunch of stuff and more is going to be on the way. So, if you feel like that's something you could do, again, head on over to Mormon Renegade and check all that stuff out. If you're not in that position to do so, I completely understand. We're all squeezed right now with high gas prices and high inflation. So even if you can't, please keep listening and maybe keep the podcast in your prayers so we can continue to grow, produce good content, and better audio quality. Thank you.
You're listening to the Mormon Renegade Podcast.
Welcome back to the Mormon Renegade Podcast. As always, you can get a hold of me either by email at mormonrenegade@gmail.com. You can also get a hold of me on Instagram and Twitter and Getter under the handle Mormon Renegade. Also, we have a website up, and that's mormonrenegade.com, so go check that out. Let me just tell everybody out there, I've been super jacked for this conversation. We're going to talk to Marcello Surjopolos, and this is a guy who has experienced some of the things I've talked about on this podcast before. I've had Kelsey Williams on, and we've talked about how fragile the economy really is. But I don't want to leave you, the listener, with no solutions. It's one thing to point out a problem. It's another thing to give maybe some solutions. So my hope is that in our conversation here with Marcello today, we can actually come up with some solutions and some ways that you can look down the road and have a level of confidence going forward, no matter what the economy does or the world does. So Marcello, dude, I'm super jacked for you to be here. Thanks for being here, man.
Yeah, super excited to be here too. So thank you.
So tell me a little bit about you. You're a member of the LDS Church, but before you mentioned you were a convert and you grew. Where'd you grow up at?
California.
California. Now, you also lived in Brazil, right?
I didn't. So my mom's Brazilian, my dad's Greek. I was born in America, so I'm a Greek-Zilican.
Greek-Zilican. I like that. But I think there's forms now with all sorts of different genders. I think there should be something there with Greek-Zillion on it. Yeah.
Oh yeah, so Greek-Zilicans, they do exist, and I'm one of them, and I'm proud to be so. But yeah, totally. I grew up in Southern California with the whole culture of the Brazilian culture in my family. I mean, so we ran around the streets without shoes on and had really tough feet and climbed every tree you can find and just little hyper boys, and it was pretty fun. It was great. But yeah, loved it.
So when did you move to Brazil?
So I went there on my mission.
Okay.
And I'm a convert to the church, so it was kind of interesting. Actually, I'll go ahead. What were you going to say?
Yeah, let's stop there. How did you convert to the LDS Church, right? Because I'm a convert to the LDS Church and then later a fundamentalist. But
yeah,
I'm always like, it would be a really hard sell, right? Like, because when I joined, it was like 3 hours of church, right? I remember thinking, if your God can't get it done in an hour and a half like everybody else's, I don't know what you want me to say. What drew you to the LDS Church? What happened there?
I'll try to condense the story a little bit, but we grew up. Well, I didn't know this until I went on a mission, but supposedly my mom had joined the church earlier in Brazil, and then I was blessed in the church as a baby, and then we left the church.
Okay.
So I grew up Greek Orthodox. I grew up metaphysical. We would go and do meditation at church for metaphysical church. We did Baptist, born again, a whole bunch of stuff, and just got to learn a lot of wonderful religions and got to see people from all different walks of life. And what's interesting is people say, "Oh, my church is true and your church is false," and all that stuff. Well, there might be some truth to a church, true and false church, but that doesn't mean every person is good or bad in either church, right? And I get to see that. I got to see the beautifulness of other religions. You know what I'm saying? Where you have some of the most faithful, loving, kind people ever. And I still like to go to other churches because it just reminds me, that we're all the same. I don't know if you remember, I don't know if you've ever read Hiram Andrus's books about Joseph Smith, Brigham Young, all that stuff. I don't know if that's familiar. You remember where he talked about Zion? And he talked about how Brigham talked about how the world will come to the gates of Zion. Do you remember that?
I do.
And they'll want to be part of the Society of Zion for its social and economic programs. And they'll say, "Hey, can we be part of your society?" And the answer is sure, but you have to commit to something. What is it? You have to bow your knee and confess that Jesus is the Christ. Well, even if we don't believe in him, yeah, we'll do it. What else do we need to do? Do we have to be baptized in your church or something like that? He goes, no. You have to promise that if you're part of our society, you can't persecute your neighbor because of their beliefs. And they say, we can worship the white dog. We can be a practicing Jew or Greek Orthodox or anything we want. Yeah, as long as you don't, persecute your neighbor because of their beliefs. Anyways, growing up outside of the church, it really has given me an appreciation for that, for what I just talked about. That if we all come together and just love each other and understand that there's strengths all over the world. You and I were talking about the Muslim experience I had in Istanbul, where I was able to go into, the Blue Mosque at call of prayer time. As a Christian here, I'm not supposed to get out there and get on the lines and go down and kneel with them and stand up with them and kneel with them while the imam is at the front doing all his chants. But I did. And the 16-year-old boys next to me, all these kids next to me, they knew I wasn't Muslim. They asked me ahead of time, and they knew I was Christian. But I'll tell you something, they were so excited to talk to me afterwards, and they just loved me. And I sat there and I said, man, I wish the world can see outside of people who have their blinders on and grow up in a place where they're ignorant. But where Istanbul is just filled with so many people all over the world that come into, do business. These Muslim boys have interacted with all types of religions, all types of countries, all types of languages, and they were so open and loving to me. But people don't see that. Anyways, going back to my story, and I apologize, that was a little bit of a
No. I think you bring up a good point. I think that's something that's worthwhile to bring up, because even Joseph and Brigham said, we're in Mormonism is the religion of truth, right? So wherever we find truth, wherever we find love, in some respects, that's Mormonism, right? I mean, that's what we are.
Yeah, and that's what I loved about Joseph Smith. I loved how he was so open to, like, I remember, let me back up a little bit. I remember an experience where I was taken by a family member to go speak to a pastor, because I didn't understand. I was talking to one of my family members, and I just didn't understand why I was being persecuted so much for my beliefs, right? And I said, look, I don't persecute you. Why are you persecuting me, right? And so I asked a couple questions. I said, let me ask you. So what you're saying is because, first of all, I believe in Jesus Christ, and this person said, well, you can't be saved. And I'm going, why is that? I say, I absolutely need him. I absolutely need him. I cannot be saved without him. He is my savior. I confess that he is my savior. And I said, according to your religion, I'm saved because of my confession. I am saved. Let me be saved in mine. Just leave me alone, please. He said, well, you don't believe in the same Jesus I believe in. And I said, well, I believe in Jesus who lived in Jerusalem about 2,000 years ago, who died on the cross for me, right? I believe in Jesus who loves me tremendously and loves you as well. And he says, no, your Jesus is totally different than mine. And I said, that's not true, and I love this person I'm talking about, so I hope I'm not demeaning him. But at the time, another family member of mine said, well, before that, let me back up. So I ended up saying, well, let me ask you a couple questions, because I really don't understand where you're coming from. You keep telling me that because of my belief in Jesus Christ, I'm going to be thrown into hell. And because I'm going to get thrown into hell, my body is going to be torn to pieces over and over and put back together. And I'm going to be in eternal flames being burned for eternity. Right? He goes, absolutely. I said, even though I just confessed that Jesus is my savior, I'm still going to go through that hell experience, right? He goes, absolutely. I said, but then an Aborigine in the middle of in the middle of Australia, 500 years ago, who never even had a chance to listen to any missionaries, who never even heard the name of Jesus Christ ever, never even had the chance to even know there was a Jesus Christ, runs in front of a raging animal that's coming after his family, and because he did that, he died and saved his family's life. He goes to hell and he gets to be burned and he gets to be torn apart for all eternity as well, because he never got a chance to confess Jesus Christ. And he said, absolutely. I said, wow. Okay. And then I said, on the flip side, because somebody confesses Jesus Christ in the right religion, right? Quote, right? They can come in and then they can rape, they can pillage, they can do all this stuff for the rest of their lives and be the most evil person, and they get saved, but the Aborigine doesn't. He goes, yep, that's what it is. Now, I'm not cutting down the religion, because I also understand that there's different sects of born again and non-denominational that they believe, no, if you're going to commit yourself to Christ, you commit yourself to being good, right? And others say, no, as soon as you commit yourself to Christ, you're saved no matter what you do. So there's all different types of beliefs out there. Obviously there's tons of beliefs in the Mormon church, right? That just
Right.
You got to respect different sides. In this belief, it didn't make any sense to me.
Right.
It just didn't click. And so I said, I'm sorry, I don't get your religion. I don't. It doesn't make any, that's not the Jesus I know. You're right.
Yeah.
We don't worship the same Jesus that I know. And so I said, if you can help me understand, that would be awesome. And so what happened is, I ended up, he said, well, let me get you in touch with one of my pastors, and I'll let you talk to my pastor. I said, I would love that, because I really don't understand where you're coming from. I would love to understand you so that at least I can have compassion for you and your beliefs. And so what happened is, they set up a meeting with one of their pastors, and I ended up going with another relative of mine who's black, right? and we ended up going to talk to this pastor. And when I walked into the office, I think it was Santa Ana, California, or Orange, California, something like that. I can't remember where it was. I walk in and there's a lady greeting me, the pastor, and I look down on her desk, and guess what it says? It says, what was it? Director for the Ex-Mormons for Jesus. And I'm like, oh no, I'm in trouble. And so I'm going, oh man, what did I get put into this? I just wanted to ask some questions. Well, I'm sitting there going, oh well, let's just go with it. Let's see what happens. So they take me into this back room that looks like a living room. They actually made it look like a living room, and it has like shelves on the side with tons and tons of books from the LDS Church. Okay, and they go into this living room setting. They sit me down, and here's her husband, and all these people from her congregation, right? And they're surrounding me. And I'm sitting there going, okay, this is interesting. And I said, thank you for taking time to talk to me. Would you mind telling me about your religion so I can understand? I really, really want to know where you're coming from. And so they sat there and they just started telling me about my religion and started talking about all this stuff. Yeah, they started telling me everything that's wrong with my religion and everything like that. And I said, wow, you know something? I'm sorry. Can I just stop you? I'm not bashing your religion. I came here to learn about your religion. Would you mind telling me about your religion, not mine? And they said, well, the only way we can tell you about our religion is to compare it to some other religion. I said, awesome, pick the Catholics, pick the Jews, pick somebody else except for my religion. And they said, fine. And then they went right back to bashing our religion, you know, the things we believe. And I'm sitting there going, wow, this is really interesting. So I'm listening to them, and I just sat there and I said, can I just stop you guys? Stop. I mean, seriously, stop attacking me. I'm not here to fight you. I want to learn from you, not fight you. I mean, you have an opportunity to teach me your beliefs, and you're totally bashing me. I said, let me ask you something. I turned to the lady and I said, what type of sins did you commit to make you so bitter and angry against the church that you have to spend your whole life and energy fighting it instead of promoting Jesus Christ? And she goes, well, I was never a member of the church. She had never been baptized, but she bragged about how she had taken all the discussions. And while I'm talking to her, I'm sitting there going, you know, you expect me to believe you as an ex-Mormon for Jesus when you're lying to me. I mean, you're lying. You were never baptized in the church. How do you expect me to believe anything you say? And so I turned to her husband. I said, let me ask you a question. I said, when were you baptized and when did you leave the church? And then he said, well, I was never baptized either. And so I turned to all the congregation. I said, have any of you ever been baptized in the church? None of them, not one single person in there, okay, had ever been baptized in the church. And I sat there and I said, okay, you are bashing me and expecting me to believe you when all of you are lying to me.
Yeah.
Expect me to believe you. And then they would start going off and going off and going off. And they'd said, okay, tell you what, why don't you give us one revelation the church has received, one easy, even any revelation since Joseph Smith. And I said, awesome. If I show you one revelation since Joseph Smith, will all of you stop bashing me? And will all of you shut up? And all of you go to the church with me? And will you all get baptized in the church? And will you stop fighting me and fighting everybody else? And they all shut up, right? Because it's not going to happen. But the interesting thing about it is I was in this situation, and the reason why I bring this up is because they got to a point where I was still kind of new in the church. I'd been back from my mission just barely. I didn't know a ton of stuff about, you know, Joseph Smith. I actually, when I was in the MTC, so back up, I'll tell my story in just a little bit. When I was in the MTC, I didn't believe in Joseph Smith. Okay. I didn't believe in the Book of Mormon. I went on a mission because a girl said, hey, I won't marry you unless you go on a mission. And so I was sitting there going, oh man, well, how do I get on a mission? You know something? I didn't believe in Joseph Smith before. I didn't. But I had an experience in missionary training center when I was preparing for a mission that taught me he's absolutely a prophet. Absolutely. You know, it wasn't me wanting it. It wasn't me asking for it. It was Heavenly Father telling me it. Even the prophet of our church could say, hey, it's all a joke. You know, Joseph Smith isn't a prophet. Book of Mormon's not true. And I'd have to sit there and say, sorry, my testimony didn't come from you, prophet. It came from Christ, from God, right. You know, from Father. So it's really interesting. But the point is, I don't know what my point was, but we're talking about Joseph Smith, Brigham Young, Zion, and how we need to all come together, right?
Yep.
Instead of seeing the differences and everything else. Anyways, you asked me a question about my conversion. So I grew up outside the church, and when I was about 11 years old, the missionaries came and knocked on our door. Okay. My mom had been a member before, and she ended up letting him in, and we thought they were awesome. They were fun. I remember Elder Jones was one of the names of it, and he could put his foot behind his neck, and I thought that was really cool.
Wow.
We called him Elder Snake Jones, and I don't remember them teaching me a single lesson, but I remember the feeling I felt around them. Does that
Hmm.
make sense?
Yep,
And
absolutely. Yep.
they asked my brother and I, and you understand the spirit, so you know what I'm talking about. What
Yep.
I thought was really cool before we even started this podcast is you said, "Can we say a prayer?" And it was a beautiful prayer, and I love that. Thank you for saying that. I mean, thanks for even offering
Oh,
to do that. But you know what the spirit feels like, and you want to be led by the spirit, and that's so cool. That's what I felt. I felt the spirit for the first time probably in my life, and I didn't know what it was as a little kid, right? But they asked my brother and I, "Would you like to be baptized?" And I said, "Absolutely. Yeah. I don't know what this is, but I want to be baptized." So I got baptized, and I remember feeling something really powerful after I got baptized. The spirit really was strong, and I didn't walked around as a little, 10-year-old, 11-year-old kid. I was 10 years old at the time, and almost 11. Because I remember I was about a month and a half before my birthday, and walking around, not wanting to step on little ants, not wanting to hurt anything, because I
right.
just felt something totally different that I never felt before. I felt this strength in me. Now, either that went away or I got used to it. I'm not sure. But what happened is, fast forward, my family started going to church. But again, we grew up Greek Orthodox, Catholic, all that stuff. Whatever we grew up, you go to church, you go home, you really don't pray much. You don't really talk about the church much. When you go home, you don't really read scriptures. In the Greek Orthodox Church, you just go to church because that's what you do. And if you can't make it every Sunday, you go at least on Easter and Christmas, right? And
Right.
so that's what we did. And after a while, our whole family left the church, including me. Well, fast forward again. I'm what was it, 19 years old, 19 years old, and I'm DJing. I'm a DJ, so I own my own business since I was 15, right? And I'm DJing a gig on Catalina Island, and there's these two blonde girls in front of me that are super cute, and they're all dancing and smiling at me, and I'm like, wow, DJ boy, and I'm the highlight, and everything else, and I ended up thinking, wow, they're really cute, but then I picked one of them, and man, I couldn't have picked a better one for me, because she was more spiritual than me, and she was just amazing, and I fell completely head over heels over her because I never had anybody that spiritual in my life, and so she and I started dating, and I just wanted to be more like her. I wanted to be. I mean, it was just amazing, how somebody can lift you up just because
Yep.
they live closer to Jesus, right? And so she ended up saying, "Well, I won't marry someone unless they go on a mission." And I'm like going, "Well, how do I go on a mission?" She goes, "Well, you got to go to church." And I'm like, "Oh man, well, how do I do that?" And she goes, "Come to my church." So 30 minutes away, we started going to church. And then fast forward, I ended up doing everything I needed to get my papers in. And the funny thing is, I put my papers in, and after I get them in, uh, the my friends all started asking me, "Where do you think you're going to go on your mission?" And the first thing that popped in my mind was Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, and I didn't even know where Rio was in all reality on a map. I knew it was in Brazil, but I didn't know where it was. And my
Mm.
family's from Belo Horizonte, so it's totally different, right? And so I don't know why I said Rio, but I said Rio. Well, everyone says that's the last place you'll go, and I kept telling people for weeks I'm going to Rio, going to Rio. Got my mission call, and my girlfriend and her mom are there when I'm opening it up. Not and my girlfriend tears it open, and I just pause, and she reads it across the kitchen because she ran away with it. She grabbed it because she wanted to open it. She ran around the kitchen, and we all paused. She tore it open, pull it out. She said, "Marcello Surjopolos, you've here been by called to serve in the Rio de Janeiro mission." And I go, "Are you serious?" And I start screaming. And I go, "Wait a minute, she's totally lying to me." She totally made that up. And so I went there, grabbed it, read it, and I'm like, "Are you serious?" And I just ran outside and did a flip into the grass, and I just go, "I can't believe it. I'm going to Rio." I'm like, "Where's Rio?"
Nice.
And so I ended up getting into the MTC. And I didn't know how the rules worked. I didn't know I was supposed to get set apart before I went on a mission. In fact, if I could back up, the funny thing is I'm going through all the interview process to go on a mission. And I go in with the stake president, and he says, "Oh, by the way, if you're going on a mission, you're going to have to wear garments." I'm like, "What are garments?" And he goes,
Right.
long underwear. And I'm like, long underwear? Yeah, if you're going to go on a mission, you're going to go through the temple. And I go, okay, what's in the temple? And my relatives were saying, don't go through the temple because it's all it is in there is, people, it's all black in there, and people wear black robes, and they do animal sacrifices, and they do sexual ordinances. And I'm like, cool. As a teenager, you don't tell a teenager that, right?
Yeah, like, yeah. You're thinking that sounds so metal, right?
I want to check that out, man. I get in the temple, it wasn't anything like that. I was like, wow, totally, they were a little bit wrong.
A lot wrong. Yeah.
So anyways, my interview with the stake president, he says, you're gonna have to wear garments. I'm like, what are those? Long underwear. And I remember being in scouts for a little bit when I was really young, Cub Scouts, and the older men would have these long underwears, and I thought, oh well, you wear boxers when you're a kid, and when you get older, you wear these old men underwear if you want to. I didn't know it had to. I didn't know it had anything to do with the church.
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
I didn't know what that was. So he said, if you're going to go on a mission, you have to go through the temple, and if you go through the temple, you have to wear these garments, and you're going to have to wear them 24/7. And I'm like, oh my goodness, are you serious? Like, that's crazy. I'm a beach boy. I mean, underneath my pants right now on Sunday, I've got my swimsuit. I'm about to get on the bus and go to the beach right after church. And he just sat there and he said, no, you're gonna have to wear them 24/7. And with the most sincere heart I could, I turned to stake president. I said, President, I can do that for 2 years. And he goes, and he says, no, it's not 2 years. It's the rest of your life. And I'm like, what? And then I committed to that. So I was really green. I had no clue what I was doing. So I get in the MTC, never read the Book of Mormon before, didn't know about Joseph Smith. Started reading the Book of Mormon for the first time in my life. and I'm sitting there bored to death because I'm sitting there thinking, this is just like a regular story. There's like no crazy doctrine or anything like this. I missed it all, First Nephi. Then I get to the end of First Nephi, and I hit the Isaiah chapters. And then I go, wait a minute. I grew up with Isaiah in the Greek Orthodox Church. That's snake. Joseph Smith totally stole Isaiah out of the Bible, put it in the Book of Mormon. And I didn't catch the whole idea that they came from Jerusalem. I couldn't catch all that. But I remember thinking, what a snake. I mean, couldn't he make up his own book? Why did he have to copy some other book and put it in his book? And I started getting really upset, and I started preaching to all the people there, that Joseph Smith is false, that he's a snake, that he stole all
in the
stuff.
MTC.
In the MTC.
Wow.
So I made one of my teachers cry. The other one was trying to figure out, how do we get this guy out of here before he ruins all the missionaries? And my other missionary teacher said, don't worry, you'll figure it out. So he was the only one that had faith in me at the time. And I don't know how they made it through me, but I kept reading, by the way, afterwards, and I got to 2 Nephi 2, and I'm like, wow, this is really interesting. If nothing else, 2 Nephi 2 is really philosophical. That's really interesting. Then I got to 2 Nephi 9, and something pricked my heart saying, you better take this a little bit more serious because this book might be true. And then it took me 6 months to get an answer. In my missionary experience, I was telling people, I know Joseph Smith is a prophet, but I don't know if the book is true, but it took me 6 months before I got an answer. Now, back up to where I learned about Joseph Smith is I'm inside these meetings with all the missionaries. And I remember being on the front right side when one of the missionaries was sitting there going, I know the church is true. I know that Joseph Smith's a prophet. I know that, I started crying. And I still remember who he was. I still remember his face. I still remember everything. And in my mind, I'm going, you're such a liar. You grew up in your goody Mormon families, and you've been brainwashed since you were little kids. You don't know any different like I do. You can't know anything like that. There's no way you can know that Joseph Smith's a prophet. You can't know the Book of Mormon's true. And I started thinking, these guys are just totally brainwashed. That was my attitude. Well, fast forward a few weeks later, when I was fighting against Joseph Smith, when I didn't like Joseph Smith, I don't know why I didn't leave the MTC, probably because I didn't want to disappoint my girlfriend at the time. And I'm in this meeting, and my branch president, and by the way, I had a branch president and 2 counselors. I thought the counselors were psychologists. I didn't know that.
I got you. I feel you. Yeah.
So I thought it was a branch president and 2 counselors, so that they were supposed to donate their time to do psychology for the missionaries. And so I didn't know what that meant. And so anyway, he's up there talking about Joseph Smith, and I'm in the back going, oh, another one, right? And I felt the Spirit so strong telling me that Joseph Smith was a prophet, even though, like, what changed? Here I am fighting against him. And it was so strong, as if Heavenly Father opened up the windows of heaven and let the Spirit just come down on me in particular out of that whole room. And for about 2 hours, I kept feeling it. And I just knew that he was a prophet. All my doubt was gone. It wasn't that I learned a ton. It wasn't
Right.
I read all these books or anything like that. He just gave me this absolute knowledge that he was a prophet. And more than that, he took away 100% of the doubt I had. Does that make sense? So
Absolutely.
I didn't understand why he was a prophet. I didn't understand how he was a prophet. I just knew he was a prophet. So fast forward to this lady, with the ex-Mormons for Jesus, and she's grilling me, and I just say, I know he's a prophet. Like I can't erase what happened that day. I didn't ask for it.
Right.
It happened. And so it was just really interesting experiences. But that kind of got me on the road to where I am today. So regardless of, I teach, I mentioned, I think when you and I were talking about, I don't know if I mentioned it here, but it's interesting that, when I teach the youth, because I used to be in charge of EFY and
Sure.
seminary institute, all these things. When I teach a youth, I ask them the question, if you saw President Nelson walking down the street, smoking a cigar and, cussing and drinking and whatever else, would you lose your testimony? And I'm sitting there going, they would say, wow, we wouldn't even know what to believe. And I'm just like, well, I believe in Christ. And it doesn't matter. The thing about it is I believe 100% in Jesus Christ, 100% in Jesus Christ because of an experience I had. Okay. Not even a question. And I 100% in Joseph Smith, 100% in the Book of Mormon. I totally believe it. I believe in the priesthood 100%. Now, do I put my faith in a person? Okay. And the truth is, no, in Jesus Christ.
Right.
Does my belief make me, follow prophets and apostles? Absolutely. Okay. But I also know that Joseph Smith had, some pretty tough times with some apostles, and even Jesus Christ had one of his apostles who ended up joining a secret conspiracy to turn against Jesus Christ. And Jesus is a pretty good guy,
Right.
And so I don't put my faith in people, but I do put my faith in priesthood. And I do put my faith in all the things that Joseph Smith asked us to, which is, even Joseph Smith said, don't put your faith in me.
Right.
It's like, put yourself in faith in Christ. And so to me, I love President Nelson. I love, the apostles. I love all these, the leaders and everything, but it wouldn't surprise me if any of them left. It wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't do anything to my testimony. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
And that's where I'm at right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So I brought you on because of your expertise in preparedness and in food storage, just being prepared for the worst.
Yeah.
And one of the things that fascinated me when we first talked on the phone is you said you were in Brazil when hyperinflation kicked in.
Yep.
Can you tell us what that looked like to somebody on the ground? Because I've had guys on here who are really knowledgeable about economy, and I feel like that they've done a good job in pointing out the fact that, hey, we're one event away, right? In the world of economy and in the world of intelligence and that sort of thing, they call it a black swan event. We are one black swan event away from economic ruin.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Tell me what that looked like.
Okay.
In Brazil as a missionary.
Okay. Let me preface it with, for the last 12 years, let me give you my history a little bit.
Sure.
I used to be director of entrepreneur development for the state of Utah under Governor Huntsman. I helped set up the entrepreneur program for the state of Utah. I love building businesses. I've done over probably 30 businesses. And when I do the businesses, I absolutely love helping people with my businesses. Money doesn't motivate me. It's just the craziest thing. But helping people, building a project, doing something meaningful, man, that totally motivates me. So about 12 years ago, some friends of mine came up to me, some investor friends, and said, hey, why don't you pick a team? Why don't you pick whatever niche business you want, and why don't you and we'll fund whatever you need, and why don't you go grow a business? And I thought, I know exactly what I want to do. I've been thinking about it for a while. Thank you so much. The funny thing is, we never even had a contract, and they gave so much money to help grow my business at the time, and they're still my best friends. And that's the interesting. I wish the world could be like that. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Where people live by integrity instead of by some contract and try to break it, right?
Right.
But what's interesting is 12 years ago, about 12 years ago, this happened. And I picked my team, I got my niche, and I was ready to get started with that niche. I told one of my teammates on a Saturday morning, I'm going to go to the internet and try to find a company we can purchase so that we don't have to start from scratch. Hang up the phone with Ryan. His name was Ryan. And when I hung up the phone, I went to Google, and as clear as day, something said do food storage. And I was like, well, wasn't thinking about that. So I looked on food storage, and I went to page 2 of Google, and I found a company called Food Storage Depot, guy running it out of his basement, barely started, but he had a lot of links. And I thought, I'm going to offer this guy to buy his business. We're going to try to rank his company and build this business. And so called him up. He wasn't expecting to sell anything. I gave him a really good price. He said, I'll take it. And we took over Food Storage Depot right in its infancy and grew it to number 3 on the internet, shipped from all over the world. Got the Navy SEALs as a client. I mean, just awesome things that happened.
Wow.
With that in mind, I've had so many conspiracy theories thrown at me since, I started studying conspiracies from 1999. Okay, back in the day when I started studying on the internet about the Illuminati and about this and about Carol Quigley and all these different things that are out there, right? And back in 1999, when you found it on the internet, because the internet was so new, it would disappear in 2 seconds. Like
Right.
I'd go the next day and it was gone. And I'm like, oh, that must have been sensitive information. Somebody took that down pretty quickly. Now today, there's so much disinformation that you just don't know what to believe.
Yeah.
And back then I could study things and find actually some truth, and so now it's just really hard to find what's true, what's not true. Is Q true? Is Q not true? Is Trump real? Is it not real? It's just, what do you know? What do you believe? You just got to keep an open mind that maybe possibly Lucifer is really good at masking things and creating, his own controlled opposition, right? So you just don't know anything. But over those 12 years, these last 12 years, I get all these conspiracy theories that are thrown at me all the time. And I always listen. That's the first rule of an entrepreneur, is you always listen, because you might think you know everything, but if you listen long enough, you'll learn something from other people. And so you never cut down an entrepreneur. You always listen to their ideas, and you're always humble enough to listen. I always listen. I'll tell you that 80-90% of the conspiracy theories go on a shelf. And I keep my little finger there, and I just keep my finger up there in case there's enough evidence for me to pull it down. Well, probably about 10 years ago, I pulled one of those conspiracy theories down because I knew there was enough evidence. Do you want to know what that was?
What's that?
It was that there would be a world economic crisis.
Yeah.
10 years ago, I knew that. I absolutely knew that wasn't a conspiracy anymore, that there was a group of people trying to create a world economic crisis to be able to bring people under control. And I knew that. So my mind was going to, well, how are they going to do this? I mean, are they going to crash the dollar? Because the dollar is so intertwined because of the petrodollar that it could influence so many nations all over the world. But I said, but that wouldn't, you crash the dollar. A lot of these third world countries really don't depend on the dollar. So that wouldn't cover every nation. It wouldn't cover a ton of nations. It would miss so many nations. So I started thinking, are they going to do a credit crunch? But then I thought, a lot of countries don't even live off of credit. They live off of cash. So that might not work. Are they going to crash the derivative market, which most people don't know about the derivative market? But the derivative market has about just in the US alone, it's over $500 billion in the derivative market. Now, if you were to add up all the currencies in the whole wide world, it doesn't add up to $500 billion, right? So I thought if they crash the credit or the derivative market, that's such a bubble. Yeah, that would take down every nation. That would crash nations all over the place. And so I thought, wow, maybe they'll use the derivative market to do it. And that was my best theory. But then all of a sudden 2020 comes around and the pandemic happens, right? And it took me about 1 week into the pandemic, because they're saying, 1 out of every 5 people will die, 1 out of every 10 people are going to die. They just started throwing out all these big numbers, and they started closing down all the businesses. Now, fast forward, we all know that 1 out of 10 people, 1 out of 5 didn't die, right?
Right.
Now, I got super sick with COVID. I almost literally died, so I'm not minimalizing it. But if it were a real pandemic, okay, where 1 out of 5 or 1 out of 10 people were dying, the government wouldn't have had to close down our businesses. We would have done it ourselves.
Right.
Nobody would have gone out. Okay. But what was interesting is at that time, and I had family members who got sick with COVID, by the way, but we didn't know what that was at the time in December because they got back from a cruise.
I
In
did too. Yep.
January, my family, okay, I talked to people at one of the big hospitals and they were seeing things from September, October in 2019, but somehow it came out in 2020, it hit the United States, right? But what's interesting is during this time, it literally took me about 1 week into the pandemic, all the hype, all the things, all the businesses, everything closing down, everything. And all of a sudden it hit me as strong as day. This is brilliant. Wow, this is
Yeah.
brilliant. I never saw this one coming.
Yep.
Let's close down the nation for a week, 10 days, right? Right. Let's close it down 2 weeks, right? Let's close it down 2 months, 1 year, 1.5 years.
Yep.
It just keeps going. And you can't go to the United States, or you can't go to California with the big, gigantic, freeways they have there. They usually have traffic, and you can't slow down 5 cars in the front on a 5-lane highway without expecting a traffic jam 2 miles back, right? It doesn't happen. So when they start, closing down all the commerce and they start doing all the things they're doing, and all the animals they're killing and all this stuff, it's gonna have repercussions. But I just thought, man, this is brilliant. How do you blame something on something you can't even see?
Yeah.
Right. And so with that in mind, it doesn't take much for our economy to fall apart. It doesn't. Just like Brazil, okay, just like I'm about to talk about, it doesn't take much for our economy to fall apart. It could be one news story
Yep.
where the BRICS nations launch their currency and everybody loses trust in the US dollar. And because they don't believe in the US dollar anymore, nobody wants dollars anymore. Right. It could be a variety of things. There could be so many things but we're one news story away at all times from us not having the security that we think we have. And when I speak to all these big groups, I can't tell you how many groups don't believe there's anything bad going to happen. I did a survey to a church group before I spoke to the church group 2 weeks earlier. I gave them a survey to know what they believed. You'd be surprised. I asked these questions like, from a scale from 0 to 10. Okay, 10 meaning it will absolutely happen, 0 meaning it won't ever happen, right? How many of you believe that we could enter World War III within the next 20 years? That we could have a large earthquake in Utah within the next 20, 30 years? Or in your lifetime, actually. I think I put that one as a lifetime. Anyways, I asked these questions. And I even asked the questions, how many of you believe that Christ could come in the next 20 years, 30 years, right? How many believe that Zion could be established in the next 20, 30 years, And I literally had people in the church say 0. I'm like, when I would never put a 0, and I'm sitting there going, I would never, I'm not a complete 10 about everything. I'm a strong 9, but I would never put a 0. I mean, I'd at least put a 1, right?
Right.
What's interesting is this: when I took all the averages of everybody in that ward and I put it together, and I've been doing emergency preparedness professionally for so long. I mean, I own the largest emergency preparedness retail store in Utah, Food Storage Depot. I started the longest lasting emergency water in the world. Okay. I work with filters. I work with I have a food line called Ready Harvest. It sells on Amazon. It's we have a whole warehouse. We do millions of dollars worth of food and all this stuff. I have a little bit of experience in all this stuff. But anyways, going back to the man, I just went ADD. I was
okay. I'm riddled with ADD. You're fine.
That was an ADD moment. I was making a point with all that, and I went back. What was I saying right before I started bragging about all my accomplishments just now?
Just with you were in this ward and you gave them the survey, and then you took the aggregate number.
Yeah, so I took the aggregate number, and what was interesting is this: when I aggregated all the numbers on an average, simple average, no weighted average, but a simple average, I took all the people who believed that Christ could come, that Zion could be established in the next 20, 30 years. And guess what the percentage of people who believed Christ could come in the next 20, 30 years? What would you guess?
3%.
Okay. That I've had people say 3% or 5% or all that stuff. It was actually 46%.
Okay.
But what's interesting about that 46% is if you think about it, the parable of the 10 virgins, okay, that's about the parable of the 10 virgins. Because think about it. Let's go into the story.
Yeah,
How
about
many
half. Yeah.
Yeah, how many of the 10 virgins believed that Christ would eventually come?
5, right?
No, eventually come.
Eventually come. All of them.
All of them did. How many of them fell asleep?
I can't remember.
All 10.
Okay.
Okay. But when the call came, because the Lord tarried, right? The Lord didn't show up when they thought he would show up, right? 5 of them were ready and 5 of them weren't.
Right.
Okay. Now you can say that's a spiritual analogy. You can say that's a food storage analogy. That you can say that's temporal preparedness, spiritual preparedness. There's a whole bunch of ways I could take it. But what's interesting is 50% of the people, and I would say that 50% is probably pretty true with most Christian religions.
I think so. Yeah.
And where 50% believe that Christ could come in the next, not will come, could come in the next 20, 30 years. And so it makes you wonder, because here's all these Christians that believe he will come someday. All 10 virgins believe that. Okay. 5 of them were ready, 5 of them weren't, right? And then 5 that weren't say, hey, we can't make it, whether that's temporal or spiritual preparedness. We can't make it without your oil. Can you give us some of your oil? Right. And they're like, well, we can't, because we wouldn't be able to have enough for ourselves. And
Right.
again, spiritual, temporal, whatever it is, right? But the point is, what side are you on? Like, I believe Christ could come in the next 20, 30 years, and I want to be ready for that. Now, if you look at the Doctrine and Covenants, D&C 45, and you look through all the different scriptures we have, it's interesting, because if you aggregate all these different verses, what does it say? It says, interestingly enough, even Matthew 24, okay, that there will be that I think it's going to get worse than we expect. In
Sure.
D&C 45, it talks about how the people will say, the Lord delayeth his coming until the end of the earth. Okay, so that's D&C 45 right there. The Lord delayeth his coming until the end of the earth. And when you look at that, you think, okay, well, what does that mean? It doesn't mean to the end of the dirt on the ground. It means to the end of all people on the earth. And then you look at another part of D&C, and it says that if the people don't repent, the earth will be left desolate without inhabitant, right? Now, if those two extremes could be presented in the scriptures, okay, and you have in Matthew and in the New Testament, where two people will be in a field and one will be taken, 2 people lying in a bed and one will be taken, 2 people will be toiling, one will be taken, whether that's physical, spiritual, whatever it is, right? If you can go to the extreme that the world can be left without inhabitant, that the Lord delayeth his coming until the end of the earth, nobody's alive anymore, unless they repent. You can imagine that it could get pretty bad before Christ comes. And this is the point I want to make with this before I get into Brazil. Wow, ADD moment.
It's all good. It's all good.
The point I want to make with this is just for those listeners out here who believe in Jesus, okay, who believe in Christ. Just know that when we hit the 7 years of tribulation, which a lot of people think, we started that in 2017. I don't think we have. My opinion is, when we hit the 7 years of tribulation, we'll know. I mean, it's going to be bad. And I think it's going to last so long that people are going to start questioning, is Christ real?
Right.
Where is he? Why isn't he showing up? Why are so many people dying? Why are so many people suffering? Why are, like Joseph Smith talked about, why are mothers turning against daughters? Fathers against sons? Why are they killing each other? Why is society falling apart? Why is the Constitution getting to a point where it's almost falling apart, where we have to save it? Why is all this stuff happening? Is Christ even real? And as a little lesson here, we got to remember to be the 5 virgins, that even though all 10 started doubting, all 10 fell asleep because they started doubting that he would make it that night. Okay, that we need to be the 5 that are prepared enough to believe that he will still come tonight. And when that time comes, we're going to have relief. We're going to have help. In that tribulation will be a lot of miracles, a lot of amazing miracles. On my mission, I remember I didn't know what the Spirit was, but I started learning. And I remember being out there, and we had an experience where I was about to turn down an alleyway, and the spirit told my companion and I, don't turn down that alleyway because you'll get hurt. And on one side of the alleyway was a mountain, and the other side of the alleyway, and there was two walls, like brick walls on both sides. On the other side was houses. I could see all the way down the quarter half mile of the alleyway all the way to the other street. And by walking down the alleyway, which we did probably 100 times, I it saved us so much time instead of walking a mile around the whole thing. I could see, and there was nobody down there, and we could get through it pretty quickly. We could run if we needed to. And when the spirit said, "Don't walk down," my companion and I said, "Do you see any trouble?" I said, "No." And I said, "Let's just do it. Let's go." Right. So we started walking, and we got about halfway through, and right when we were in the middle, the guy starts running down the hill of the mountain to jump on us and kill us, or rape us, or not rape us. What's it called when you steal people's money?
Mug 'em.
Mug us, kill us, whatever he was going to do. And Brazil, Rio de Janeiro at the time was number one and number three most dangerous places in the world. Now, what's interesting is he gets to the point where he's about to jump on top of us when a gate opens up. I've never seen that gate open before. Didn't see anybody there opening the gate. I just saw it go and open up. Till this day, I think it was an angel, a spirit, or something who did that for us because I didn't see anyone there. It just opened up. The guy jumped in a bush because he was afraid somebody was going to catch him. And we ran and got out of there. Now, the spirit told us there was problems, right? But we didn't listen. Now, fast forward in the mission, I'm walking down a street at night, and I feel the same feeling. And I turn to my companion. I said, "Hey, we're in trouble." And he goes, "What do you mean we're in trouble?" I said, "Something's wrong." And he goes, "But I don't see anyone." I mean, why do you say that? We've walked down the street a ton of times. And he goes, I know it. I feel it. Something's wrong. So we look around, and far, probably about a couple hundred yards back, is a guy hiding behind cars and things, trying to sneak up with us. I say, "See that guy right there?" I go, "He's about to get us." And so we ended up running into a born again church while they were doing their drumming and their clapping and everything else. And we just ran inside that church because it was safe and stood in the back. And the pastors kind of got tense and said, "What are they doing in here?" Right? We're like, "No, seriously, we're just trying to save our lives." That's it.
Right.
So we learned to listen. Now, fast forward again. I'm walking down the street through some wooded area because we cut these corners as missionaries do to get back to our apartment, like we had done probably 100 times before, and like I always do, right? And so we're cutting through these woods, and these three people with nylons on their head come running right at us as fast as they can, screaming, "We're going to kill you! Assault! We're going to kill you!" Assault in Portuguese, right? And they come running right at us with the nylons on the head, and I didn't feel any fear. I didn't feel any danger. I didn't feel any darkness. I felt light. I just didn't know what it was. So I put my hands in my pocket, kind of leaned on one foot, and kind of cocked my head while I just stared at them like they were baboons running at me. And I just stared at them with no fear and just kind of crunched my eyes a little bit, going, "What are these guys doing?" And they ran all the way up to my companion and I and stopped about 2 feet in front of us. And they took off their nylons, and they're 17, 18-year-old kids, thinking that it would have been smart and funny to scare the missionaries, right? I didn't know that. Okay. The spirit knew that. And so when I stared at them, they asked this question when they stopped. They said, "Why didn't you run?" And I said, "Because the spirit told me that there was nothing wrong." And they said, "When we ran at you and started trying to scare you, and you stared at us like you just stared at us, you scared us." So they said that to me. And I ended up teaching two of them and baptizing two of them, which was really kind of fun. But what's interesting is this. The point is, regardless of the religion, regardless of the spiritual background, the point I'm making on this is regardless of how bad things get in the future, 5 of us at least need to be on the side where we trust Christ enough to make it, that we trust Christ will come, even though we can't see how he'll ever come, right? Because things are getting that bad. And again, we have the promise that he'll shorten the days of tribulation for the elect's sake, right? For the elect's sake, he's going to make it better for people. So anyways, my point is trust in Christ, right?
Right.
Now let's go to back to Brazil, since I just started that, and since it took us forever to get to this point.
It's all right.
Brazil. Would you? I hope you don't mind that I actually
Not
went
at
into
all.
stuff.
Not
It
at
was
all. No.
you asked me to go by the spirit, and I did.
Yep. No, that's good.
And I will continue to go in this conversation as you asked me to go.
No sweat.
When I was in Brazil, it was interesting because Brazil and the United States are two different animals. Okay. Brazil back in the 1989, 1990, when they went through 30,000% inflation in 1990. Okay. Just to give you a feel what that feels like. Say you get $1,000 paycheck on January 1st and you don't spend it. By the time you go to spend it on March 31st, 3 months later, it literally has the purchasing power of $25.
Yep.
Okay. Now, if you were to take $30,000, a paycheck, $30,000 in January 1st, if you go to December 31st of that same year, you have the purchasing power of less than $1 at that point. $30,000. Okay. Imagine that's some people's paycheck for the whole year.
Yeah.
And you go buy a thing of bubble gum with it, right? A candy bar with it instead of paying your mortgage, right? And so that's what happened in Brazil. Now, in Brazil at the time, okay, people didn't go in debt. When they were going to build a house, they bought one brick at a time and they paid cash. Okay. So Brazil was in a place where they could handle this type of situation a lot better than we could handle it today if we were to go in, because we live in debt. Everybody, pretty much almost everybody in the United States lives on debt, credit cards, mortgages, you name it. It doesn't matter, right? We're a debted nation. They could handle it a lot better than we can today. If it were to happen here, we would be in trouble. We wouldn't be able to handle it. But they knew how to get around it. They had enough community to be able to help neighbors out. They lived by cash, not credit. So they knew that, they didn't have big houses. They didn't have all these expensive things. They, if the utilities went out, okay, well, they're used to that happening anyway. Okay.
Right.
That's right. So I learned a big lesson, because what happens, and I'll tell you what will happen in our country when things do get worse, if they go down the same pathway. You go to Target and you see the aisleways and you want to get a vacuum cleaner. How many different types of vacuum cleaners would you find there?
Dude, I try to avoid Target. My wife loves Target. I try to avoid it, but I'm going to go on a limb and say you could probably find 12 at any one.
Yeah, maybe 10, a dozen. I don't know. I don't go to Target much either. But the thing about it is, you'll probably find a number of different types of vacuum cleaners, right? And then you go to look at blenders, right? And you see 10 blenders and 10 coffee makers and 10 this and 10, 5, 10 of each type of thing, different types of brooms, different types. I mean, you just have so much variety. Now, when a nation starts losing the power of its currency, it cycles. I mean, I don't know if you knew this, but this last month, November, a lot of people didn't spend money.
Yep, I know that.
People are starting to really worry, right? And it's becoming a cycle. Now, when people spend less money, how many businesses can stay in business?
Not very many. The big boys, right? The ones that take some financial abuse.
Absolutely. But you start seeing more and more businesses go out of business because people aren't spending money. Well, that's what happened in Brazil. What happened is you would go into a store, and instead of seeing 10 blenders or 10 coffee makers or 10 vacuum cleaners or whatever else, you have one of each, and it's expensive and it's really low quality. And because that's what it is, people aren't spending money on getting a new broom. They're using their old brooms.
Right.
People aren't spending money on a new blender. They're using their old blenders, or borrowing their neighbors, right?
Right.
When needed. And so you can't sustain businesses if nobody buys anything.
Right.
And it becomes a cycle. Now, I did learn a cool lesson, an amazing lesson. And this was from a hot dog vendor on the corner in Brazil, in Petrópolis, in Rio de Janeiro. He would stop me once in a while and say, "Do you have any American dollars?" I said, "I do." And he says, "Are you going to take them to the bank anytime soon?" I said, "Yeah." He says, what is the bank paying for one of your dollars? 1,000 of yours. He says, tell you what, if you have $1 on you right now, I'll pay you 1,010 and I'll take your dollar and save you a trip to the bank. I said, deal. That's a win-win. Awesome. I'll take it. Give him $1. He gives me 1,010. I go take that 1,010 and guess what I need to do? I have to spend it as fast as possible because that 1,010 might only be worth 800 tomorrow.
Yep.
So I got to go buy as much as I can quickly. Now, what's interesting about what he did is he just got $1 from me for 1,000 of his notes. And a week or a month later or whatever, that dollar is now worth 10,000 of his notes.
Right.
So he goes find somebody who will buy $1 for 10,000 of his notes, even if they don't jack it up. It's the same price the bank would pay, right?
Right.
Or he goes to the bank and now he gets 10,000 of his notes. And now his 10,000 of those notes can buy exactly the same amount that he could a month earlier for 1,000 of his notes. He hasn't lost any value. Does that make sense? Because of the dollar.
Yep.
Right?
It absolutely does. Yep.
Okay. So he hedged inflation with $1. Now, $1 was the strongest currency of the world that I know of. Now you look today and you're like, how would I do that today? And I would say two things. Number one, find something like silver, poor man's gold, right? Silver, gold, but I like silver, to be able to hedge inflation so that when inflation happens, you're able to, take your dollar might be worth 50 cents in a month, but that silver coin can buy you $2, right?
Right.
Okay. It can double in price because it keeps its value. So right now, I think silver is being completely manipulated because there's no way silver should have a margin of more than a couple dollars.
Sure.
We're having $15, $20 margins right now, so it's totally being manipulated, in my opinion. And so I think silver someday will explode, is my opinion, total opinion. That's my disclaimer that I'm not a financial advisor.
Right.
But I think it'll someday gain a ton of value, and it could act like a really good hedge for inflation for short term. Now, whether our economy goes down financially and then gets better and then goes down again, or whether it goes down and just keeps getting worse, there will be a time, in my opinion, after 12 years of professional experience, hundreds of thousands of dollars mistakes, tens of thousands of hours of experience, right, in doing preparedness. My opinion is, I believe there will come a day when things get so bad that even a silver coin isn't worth anything.
Yep. I agree with you. So the last time the economy really took a dump back in 2007, 2008, things got really slow for surveyors. I was blessed because I was able to kind of, do my own thing, and I surveyed for farmers out in rural Idaho, and I did okay. It only took me 3 surveys a month to do more than okay. So I was very blessed. However, I had a ton of time on my hands. And so I read everything I could on economies. And the one case study I keep coming back to is Germany, the Weimar Republic, right? The republic that was in power right before Hitler stepped in. Mm-hmm. And when hyperinflation hit there, and they inflated their currency for a different reason than we do, but the results are still going to be the same, I fear. You had guys who, when hyperinflation really kicked in, started to demand to be paid every day. Mm-hmm. Because just as you said, the dollar lost their purchasing power, and they weren't getting paid in checks. They were like, basically, back the Brinks truck up and we'll get paid in cash. The wives would be standing right there. They would give the money to the wife to go buy the necessities, milk, bread, whatever. And because it was rising at such an accelerated pace, it was hundreds, if not thousands of dollars more the following day than if you'd have bought it right then. Mm-hmm. The other experience I had that taught me a lot was right before the lockdowns happened for the pandemic. And I was at home, and it was about midnight. I mean, it was strange. I was just up reading like I normally do. I don't sleep much. But I remember I just felt the Spirit say, Go to Winco.
Hmm.
Go to Winco. So I jump up and I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing, but okay. So I take a drive. I couldn't sleep. I was restless that whole night. And I remember I walked in the store and the shelves are just bare.
Wow.
And people are lined up. I mean, the line was so long, and most Wincos are laid out fairly similar, but where the check stands were, the line stretched all the way back by the bakery, all the way back down, and almost down to where the meat was.
You're kidding. Oh my
And
goodness.
people were hoarding. I shouldn't say hoarding. They were, it's not like it was greed. They were scared, right? There was a palpable fear.
Yep.
That I had never felt since like 9/11, right? That's the closest thing I could come up with. But I just remember I just walked the aisles. We didn't need anything because my wife is a rock star and we had plenty of food in the house and plenty of supplies. And I didn't need anything. So I wasn't there buying anything. And it became evident on why I was there during that time. But I just walked up and down the shelves. Flour's gone, sugar's gone, ramen noodles are gone. It's just gone. It's just gone. They're just bare. And these poor Winco people, they're unloading the truck, trying to restock, and they can't even get the boxes open. People are all over the boxes, tearing it open themselves and getting stuff. Noodles, just anything you can imagine, right?
Yeah.
And as I'm standing there and I'm like, why am I here? Why do I have to look at this? And I'll never forget it. And I've never shared this story with anyone but my wife before this podcast that you and I are doing here. The Spirit said, just know this is a warning.
Wow.
This is a warning of things to come.
Wow.
But a taste and a sample. And that left such a huge impression on me that as I've watched things begin to unfold now, over and over, I keep getting alarm bells going off in my gut all the time. And I'll never name names. There's guys I bring on the podcast, but there's other folks I talk to who have asked that I don't reveal who they are, but they're in the know. I'll just say it like that.
Yep.
And we are not stable. We are not solvent as a nation, and we are a hair's breadth away from things we haven't seen maybe ever. I mean, the closest you can come to is maybe the Great Depression. And I think a lot of people feel this. They don't know how to articulate it. They don't know what to make of it. But there is something wicked coming our way that will be like nothing we've ever seen. And the laws of economy are a lot like the laws of physics. At some point, they're going to be obeyed. And the farther up you go, the longer the fall back down. And we haven't taken our medicine economically since the Great Depression. We've managed to squirrel our way out of any bubble.
We weren't $30 trillion in debt back then either.
Yeah. And so you go back and you do the math and you start figuring out what we've done. We averted one bubble by, I shouldn't say averted it. We shortened it by extending credit. The last time and this is the hard thing for people to realize. I mean, really the recession of 2008 lasted probably 2012, 2013 before things really picked back up again. If we just look at that was shortened because we bought our way out of it with cash.
Absolutely.
Well, now that cash is gone, what do we stop it with this next time?
Exactly.
There's nothing left.
About it. You look at our economy and look at inflation period. Okay, we have the Dow, we have the stock market looking like it's doing really good and everything else. Is it really doing as good as it is, or is it that our dollar has lost value and it appears to be doing just as good, even though it's going down, right? Because dollars change numbers, right? Value changes numbers, and you look at how many trillions are going back into spending. I think it's just a matter of time. The government stops spending money. Guess what happens? Things implode, right? I think it's a false. We're living in a false reality right now. And
excuse me, we absolutely are, dude. They change who can be admitted into the Dow. right? If a company's doing too badly, they're like, okay, you're not part of this anymore to make those numbers look better.
Yeah.
If an American citizen or American business did their books like Wall Street and the government, we'd be in jail. And that's just the truth of it. And so I feel like we've done a good job here in diagnosing, the problem. And I feel like I've done that on other podcasts, but now I want to present some solutions. Right now, I'm not a big believer in just being the guy who just says, here's the problem, we're screwed. See you later.
Good luck.
I tend to want to give. I love. I love resolution. I love my listeners. Yeah, I love my listeners. I really do. As I've come to know these folks, I have a tremendous love for them, and I want to present solutions on the way out. Because here's the thing: hope is contagious, just like fear is contagious. Mm-hmm. And if we can be that people that just we're anchored to truth and we're anchored to things that are real, not only is that good for us and our family, but that helps us in being able to tell people you don't got to go dark here, right? Because fear and hunger is a volatile cocktail, and let's not just preserve ourselves. Let's show people the way out. Absolutely. You don't have to go over that cliff with humanity. So the other reason I brought you on is you have a lot of solutions, right? That doesn't mean it's going to be pleasant. Doesn't mean it's going to be fun, but there are ways through. And I want to talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about that. If we're going to talk about that, let me go a little bit further on what you're talking about. When I teach, I teach from a more positive point of view, but also from a realistic point of view. I was teaching a group of people that were pretty wealthy, and I'm asking them how much food storage do you have? How many supplies do you have? How prepared are you for an earthquake or an economic collapse or anything like that? And it was surprising that not very many of them had very many of anything. It's just even here in Utah, which is crazy. You're just like preparedness capital of the world, and barely anybody had anything. Now, what's interesting is in fact, a little side note. I was talking to a group of men one time, and I asked them all these questions. Now, if I asked their wives the question, it was a separate answer.
Yeah.
And I'd say, how many of you guys have at least a year's worth of food storage? And all these men's hands go up. If I were to ask the same families of the women, how many of you would have a year's worth of food storage? Barely any of their hands would go up. So what's interesting is women tend to underestimate how prepared they are, and they tend to overestimate how bad things are. Okay. Men tend to underestimate how bad things are, and they tend to overbrag how prepared they are. Okay. And it's just part of being a guy, I guess. You got to show, well, I've got everything. And I have so many people say to me, well, I don't need to really prepare, because when something really bad happens, I'm really creative and I'll figure it out then. And that's the majority of that is the majority of guys.
Right.
And I have all these women. My clients are primarily women, like 60% women. And a lot of them are 50, 60 years old and older, because they understand what has happened in history, where a lot of 20-year-olds go, oh, no, this is normal. This is how everything is. No, this isn't normal. No. So what's interesting is men don't know where they're at a lot of times. It takes the women a lot of times to say, no, we need to get prepared. And if a guy has a attitude, I'll figure it out when it happens. And again, you can't force somebody. If you force them, they'll go the other way. You have to find a way to get them interested without forcing them. But if they have that attitude, just remember, when you had your experience with the shelves empty, that could happen very quickly for good.
Yep.
Not just for a day or two, for good. If an EMP attack happened and all the electricity, all the trucking, all the food production, all the water pumping, everything happened, no refrigerators, it could be done for a year or more. Okay?
Absolutely.
And then the congressional study on that said up to 90% of the United States could perish or die because of that, right? And so go ahead. What were you going to say?
I was going to say I have when Hurricane Katrina happened, I was on the eastern shore of Maryland, and I worked for a bigger company. And we got work to go down there and do the levees. And I made a good friend who worked for FEMA, and he said EMP is his nightmare scenario. That's the one that keeps everybody awake at night in his agency. 90%.
Very possible, very, 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 very possibly it's going to happen. Yep. And so people got to understand, you got to prepare for the worst and hope for the best, right? And so I'm talking to this group of very wealthy people, and I asked a question. I said, you guys, it was guys, and I said, you guys aren't very prepared, but you have the means to do so. I have the widow's mite walk into my store, and with the last little bit of money they have, they buy everything they can to get prepared for emergencies. But here, you guys, you can go on vacations for $50,000 for $10 and enjoy your vacation with your family, but you won't even spend $1,000 on emergency food when you have the means to do so. And I said, can I just give you from a logical point of view, let me ask you a question. Do you think the dollar is going to be stronger next year or weaker? And they were like, well, it's getting weaker. Inflation's happening. Do you think you're going to be able to buy more with your dollar or less? Well, obviously, we just answered that question, less, right? Well, do you think possibly we could go to a recession? Well, yeah, it's been the longest stretch in our nation's history without a recession. Obviously, it could happen. I said, if it does happen with us being $30 trillion in debt, is it possible that that recession could turn into a depression this time like we had 100 years ago? Okay. And they said, yeah, obviously it can. I said, if there was a depression, would the depression in your minds only last a year or less? Or do you think it would last a year or more? And they're like going, well, if it were a depression, not a recession, I mean, the last one took 4 or 5 years to get out of, right? 5, 6 years. If it were depression, yeah, I mean, it would last probably 7, 10 years or more. And I said, then you just answered your own question. Things are going to get bad. They can get really bad. Why don't you go spend your money and buy food for $1 today instead of $100 tomorrow? And go get 30-year shelf life foods, like real foods, not the ones they say up to 25-year shelf life, like you see online all the time. Some of the companies out there that advertise the most are the cheapest, worst products in our industry, but they have the biggest margins, so they can outmarket everybody, and everybody thinks they're the best, right? But they're not, And so, I don't play those games. I think they're dumb. So get away from the up to 25-year shelf life foods and all that stuff. Get to the foods that actually do work. But I was telling these guys, why don't you go buy, extra food and put it away? And I said, if I'm wrong and we do not go through anything at all, okay, and this world is perfectly perfect, 10 years from now, and there's no recession, there's no depression, there's still going to be inflation. You'll be able to turn to me and say, hey, Marcello, that was the best investment we could have made. We bought food for $1 and now it's $100 and we're eating it up and we're saving a ton of money from groceries because of your advice. Thank you so much. Right now, if the economy does crash or we go through an EMP or whatever, and they have all that food, then they can thank me because they actually got prepared for emergencies. So the point is, people have to get out of this mentality of I don't need to get prepared until things get that bad. You need to get prepared before they get bad. It's better to be prepared a year early than even just one day too late. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, it does. Absolutely, it does. Because when it comes, it's too late. And I have a feeling that this is going to come, to borrow from scripture, come like a thief in the night, right? Yeah, what we're up against now is nothing that it's not something you can plan for a week beforehand. This will be drastic and this will happen overnight. It doesn't take much. We saw it, right? Just a government official saying, hey, we're going to go ahead and everybody's staying home for 2 weeks, right? Panic in Orem, Utah, right? Yeah. The one place on God's green earth that should have been the best place to be during that, right? Common sense would dictate, oh, these people have had it drummed into them for decades. Get prepared, have food storage. No, we were as flat-footed as anybody else when that punch came to the face, right? Yeah. And it bore it out. And it was a spooky, spooky scenario to stand in the middle of that store. And I've never been someplace where the fear was that palpable, right? And I felt genuine concern. I just wanted to put my arms around people and be like, it's going to be all right.
And see, that wasn't even a huge crisis.
No, that was planned. That was planned, right? That was with the idea of, and we're going to keep stores open through this so you can still go get food. This was not war tomorrow where all of a sudden we can't get supplies in. We stop trading with China. We stop importing something. It was, hey, the stores are still going to be open, but everyone's working from home for 2 weeks and we're canceling school. It was just that set that whole cascade of events into motion.
Absolutely.
It revealed how fragile we really are as a society.
Yeah, we're totally dependent. And I have a friend who's very extremely wealthy, and he drove around with his family, and he sold all his properties, tons of properties, and he drove around in a RV for the longest time looking for where he's going to live next. And here he is, totally wealthy in an RV with a bunch of kids, hair's unkept. People were probably thinking, poor guy, we probably need to donate to this guy. And he could live anywhere he wanted to. He ended up moving to a place in Idaho. And he bought like a little piece of farmland and kind of out in the boonies. And he said something interesting to me. He said, Marcello, we're still close to a Walmart. That's too uncomfortable for me. If we're that dependent that we need to have a Walmart and I have to depend on a Walmart, that's still too uncomfortable. The point I got from him is I'd rather create pain now and gain later rather than gain now and pain later. I'd rather pay the price of the pain now to learn how to get prepared now. And buy the supplies, get what you need. Don't hoard, okay? Don't become an extremist, but do the right things. Learn how to do it. You and I talked about, I'm going to be putting on a preparedness challenge, and I can get you the link later on. But I'm going to do a preparedness challenge where I'm going to teach people how to do 7 steps of preparedness to get ready, right? And the interesting thing is, in our industry, we have 2 camps. We have preppers and survivalists. Okay. People have heard of preppers and survivalists. I went to the internet, tried to figure out, okay, what's the definition between the two and where's the delineation? Because obviously I'm a prepper, I'm a survivalist, I'm both, right? And what's interesting is preppers learn survival skills and survivalists learn prepper skills. There's a mix between the two. You're not just a prepper, just a survivalist for the most part. Some people are. But when I looked at it, I couldn't find a definition. Where's the delineation? Until I thought, okay, wait a minute, I can define this really easy. It's not hard. A prepper is somebody who focuses on supplies over skills, and somebody who's a survivalist focuses on skills over supplies. Okay. Now, it doesn't mean that's all they do, but that's the focus, right? Now, on the outskirts of the prepper are the senseless, fear-driven, ignorant hoarders who buy anything and everything, fill up their whole house, make their families really uncomfortable, but they don't know what they're buying. They're just buying everything. Okay. And a lot of times the stuff goes bad. It goes spoils. It's the wrong stuff. You can't live off of it. And they just spent their life savings on this stuff, right? There's an order to getting the right stuff at the right time. And that's what we teach. I'll be sharing some of that stuff in the challenge I'm going to be doing. And you need to know what to buy without going overboard and becoming a hoarder. Now, on the flip side, on the skill side, you have the survivalists, right? And on that side, if you're going to go to the extreme, you have either minimalists, okay, who say, well, I don't really need any supplies at all because I know how to use a knife and I know how to survive and I'll be able to survive no matter what. So I don't need any supplies, okay? And that's an extreme. In all reality, I was teaching at a survival conference, about 450 people there, and I was teaching for about four or 5 days on preparedness. Okay, not survivalness, but preparedness, the prepper side. And one of the guys actually told me, "Well, I really don't need to get supplies because I know how to survive." And I said, "Why would you do that to your family? Why would you do that to your kids? How many people do you think are going to go after the same neighborhood dog?" Okay. It's like there's only so many of those dogs, right? How are you going to feed your family? Are you going to try to kill their cats too and everything else? Everyone else is going to go after those same animals. Why don't you, while you have the means, get some supplies in place to be able to protect your family? And if you get to an emergency and you can use all your survival skills and never have to dip into that supply of food and water and everything else, awesome. Good for you. Awesome. But why would you put your family in danger in a place where they are going to be so uncomfortable because maybe your survival skills aren't good enough at that point, right? Why wouldn't you just get the supplies now and just do the right thing? And he goes, oh, good point, And the point is, on the survival side, there are the extremists, which are either minimalists, I can survive off of anything, let me show off, right? And typically guys, right? And the women are like, no, we need supplies. And then the other side are militants. And those, again, are based on fear or ignorance, right? Because they don't believe they need supplies anyways, because they have enough guns and bullets that they're going to just fight everybody and take somebody else's supplies. And if anyone gets close to their house, they'll shoot them, right? And so either of those are just extreme, the hoarders or the minimalists or militants. The truth is, it's good to be a prepper. It's good to be a survivalist if you have the right skills without going overboard, and you have the right supplies without going overboard. Those need to come just like a Venn diagram. Those two circles need to cross over. And that middle circle, that middle area right in the middle where they cross over, that's where people can thrive, not just survive during emergencies. That's a thrivalist. That's where we're starting to teach people, is not the negative side of preparing, but the positive, the thrivalist. So I just purchased thrivalist.com, and we're going to be creating a whole new wording in the industry called thrivalist, so that we can teach people to get the right supplies and the right skills. Okay. And the reason skills are so important is because, think about it. What if you did get, 7-10 years worth of supplies? You have tons of supplies, and all of a sudden there's something that happens and you lose all your supplies. Okay. You can't take away your knowledge and skills.
Right.
If you have knowledge and skills, okay, you can walk through TSA with knowledge and skills. You might not be able to bring all your supplies, but through TSA, they can't take that away from you. And so you have to have both sides. Okay. And hopefully you never lose your supplies. But if you do, at least you have some knowledge and skills to back it up. So that's the thing. Those thrivalists, that's what we're going to be teaching people how to do, is be thrivalists. And that's where we're going to be introducing in this big preparedness challenge that's coming up pretty soon. So I'll hopefully get that link to you to help you out. But anyways, I can go in a whole bunch of directions. Do you want me to teach in the 5 days of the challenge? I'm going to go in depth into the 7 steps of preparedness. Would you like me to touch on those 7 steps right now? Or
yeah, let's just touch on them. I don't want you to give anything away, so to speak. You know what I mean? Because I am a capitalist. So, I mean, but if
I could go on for hours on each step and not give a ton away, because I spent over 3,000 hours putting together a course for people to be able to do preparedness. And
perfect.
And there's so much material. I could give a ton of material and still more.
We're already at the 2-hour mark.
Oh, we are. Wow.
Let's go ahead and let's touch on those 7, right? Okay. Let's just kind of make a list. And maybe what I'll do is as I edit this and get it ready, I'll also go ahead and list those 7 steps for people.
Oh, that's a great idea.
And then we'll have your link there, and they can go to that link and get the full story, so to speak. But let's just hit those 7 real quick, Marcello.
Yeah, let's do it. So what happens is when it comes to preparedness, there's about four sections in my course that everybody covers. I added 3 more that weren't there, and I still put it all in 7. People say to me, oh, you can't put all your steps in 7 steps. And I'm like, absolutely, you can. And I'll give you the logic why. So let's start with the first one. The first one is a proper risk assessment. So what I mean by a proper risk assessment is that, and you could put just number 1, risk assessment, if you want to, or proper risk assessment, either way. But what I mean by that is, when I speak at all these big groups, I ask people, what are you preparing for? And what kind of answers do I get? Oh, a large earthquake. I'm preparing for a hurricane. I'm preparing for EMP attack. I'm preparing for food shortages. I'm preparing for inflation. I'm preparing. They tell me all these things. And that's what most people do. That's where people stop. They stop. Okay. The truth is, they have no clue what they're preparing for still. Because I can say, okay, what does an EMP attack do to refrigeration? What does it do to transportation? What does the EMP attack do to the mentality of people in an area? What does EMP attack do to the large power transformers? How long do they need before those can be repaired or replaced? How long before a riot starts breaking out? 72 hours, right?
3 meals.
Yeah. How long before bad people start doing bad things to good people? what happens during an AP? And then, the question, earthquake. Okay, so what's the difference between a 5.0 and a 7.0 earthquake in your area? Like, we live in Utah, right? Now, where you live, where I just moved out of, by the way, is in where my store is an ancient lake bed. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you don't move out because you're afraid and all that stuff. You move out if the spirit tells you to, which is what happened to me. Okay. You stay there if you're supposed to stay there. Even if you're going to die, you just follow the spirit. It doesn't matter. But what happens is, in that ancient lake bed, when I was preparing for emergencies, I thought, well, if I'm going to teach people to do a proper risk assessment, which in my course, I actually compile all the information, like 80% of the information, so people don't have to do all the work I had to do. I teach people what to do, like, this
Mm-hmm.
is, I'm going to do the risk assessment for you, and then you have 20% to do it on your own, because I don't live where you live. So what I did is I ended up learning a ton about earthquakes. Like, what is a 5.0? What's a 7.0? What's a 10.0? Where's the largest earthquake that ever happened? What did it do? What did it do around the area? What did it do for tsunamis? Like, where are the worst places in the United States for earthquakes? And people say California. I go, no, worst in California is Oregon, the coast of Oregon and
Mm-hmm.
Washington. Worse than that.
Yep.
Utah's really bad. The Midwest is really bad. You have all these different places that people don't even know about, because they're just not aware of it. And so I ended up studying about earthquakes, and I put all that in my course, by the way. The stuff I studied, I passed on to other people. But what's interesting is I ended up calling the state. I called local, like, the school boards, utilities, started asking questions to find out what it is locally for me. And this is what I found out. Because Utah Valley, or Salt Lake Valley, is an ancient seabed, it's full of sand. If that sand starts shifting, there's a lot of water underneath, and we're going to have liquefaction. It's going to flood a lot of places. Okay, water is going to come up from the ground. Okay, worse than that is a lot of the valley has antiquated water pipes, like clay pipes, and they don't
Yep.
switch them out until they break. Okay, so what happens is, when they break, they replace them. But a lot of the water mains, the water mains go across the fault lines. Those are
Yep.
going to break. How do you fix 70,000 pipes in 1 week? You can't.
You can't.
And the state is preparing for several of the cities in Salt Lake to be without water for 12 months.
Sure.
But how do you bring enough water in tankers when the roads are damaged, when there's a million people needing water every day? How do you do it? And the thing about it is, it's difficult. You got to choose your battles. And so I teach people, here's how you do water the right way to be able to prepare for that. And there's a really easy way to do it. It doesn't have to be hard, but you can handle years of not having running water from the city if you know what to do, if you know the right things to do. Now, that's a risk assessment. If you know your risks, if you know you can be without water for 12 months, your preparation is going to be different. If you didn't know that, you'd be different than if you did know that, right? So a proper risk assessment is the first step to preparedness. The second step is sudden emergency preparedness, because once you know your risks, you got to understand there's long-term emergencies, there's short-term emergencies. So sudden emergency preparedness has to do with your 72 or 96 or 120-hour kit, right? Where you put it on your back and you head out. But most people think that if they got their emergency grab and go kit, they're totally ready for emergencies. The dumb thing is, most people haven't looked at the majority of the emergencies in the world. Nobody leaves their home.
Right.
Okay. You very, very rarely use that 72-hour kit, 96-hour kit. You rarely, very rarely use it. So it's a good thing to have. You should have your car kit like I do. You should have your 72-hour kit like I do. You should have your fire kit. And if you're on the second story, you should have your ladders. You should have everything to get out. I'm a firefighter. I understand how dangerous it can be. Okay. You should have your fire kit. Okay. That's not bad. You should have all that stuff. But that's just the beginning of preparedness. But sudden emergency preparedness not only has to do with your grab and go kit, but it has to do with emergency plans. Like, what do you do if there's a 7.0 earthquake at 2 o'clock in the morning in the middle of winter at 7 degrees outside? What do you do? How do you do that? How do you handle it with your little kids and everything else? What do you do? So that's your plans. And luckily I teach what to do, for the most part, in my courses. And then I have people create their own plans, right? And then you got to practice those plans at least once, right? You got to take your plans, get your family together, and say, if there were a 7.0 earthquake, let's pretend at 2 o'clock in the morning, and everybody get in bed and go to sleep. And then I'm going to shake the doors. What do you do? And then they all practice. They end up curling in a ball on their beds with their pillow over their head until the shaking stops enough that they can get to a place of safety, right? And so they learn what to do because they practice it. Well, you need to do that for 3 to 5 major emergencies that are sudden emergencies, not long term like an EMP or anything, but sudden emergencies. Okay. And you got to be ready for sudden emergencies. If you need to get out, stay there, whatever it is. That's not number 2. Number 3 is water. Okay. Now, water is super important, and you can put down water preparedness. That's a better way to put number 3, water preparedness. A lot of people don't understand the rules of 3, right? You can live 3 seconds, or you can die in 3 seconds without hope, right? You can shoot yourself or whatever else. You can die 3 seconds without air. You can go 3 minutes without 3 minutes, 3 seconds without hope, 3 minutes without air, 3 hours without heat. Okay, 3 days without water, 3 weeks without food, and three months without human interaction. Right? You can go crazy. So those are rules of 3. That 3 days without water is more important than 3 weeks without food. So I teach all about water, and then I get to food. And food is probably the biggest part of my courses is food, because there's so much to food. There's short-term food storage, long-term food storage, growing food or replacing your food, preserving your food, all these different things that have to do with food. And so that's just a whole huge section. And that's prep step number 4. This the 4th step is food preparedness. Then you get to the 5th step, which is meet your other needs. Now, people say, well, you can't put that all in one step. Heating, sanitation, communication, all these different things are all in one step. They said you can't put that in one step because all of those are, could be the difference between life and death. And I said, yeah, listen to what my words just said. Meet your other needs. Okay, you need these things, or else you could die if you didn't have them. But they all go in one step, and the reason they go in one step is because there is a psyche that comes with food and water that doesn't come with the other ones. I could jimmy rig almost everything in the other needs, shelter, sanitation, all this stuff. I can jimmy rig if I needed to. Okay, but I can't jimmy rig food and water.
Sure, yeah,
and those are needed. So in an emergency, food and water is your comfort, and that's where you panic if you don't have it. The other stuff you have time to figure out, but food and water, if you don't have it, you panic. And maybe toilet paper. After 2020, I would add toilet paper to that list, and I'm totally kidding. But
well, that's funny you should bring that up, because I have a friend who is a psychologist, and I asked him about this. I was like, toilet paper. Explain the run on toilet paper. He said, I looked at this, and there's 2 things. One is like using toilet paper. That's one of those things you're like, okay, that separates us from the savages, right? From the animals.
Yeah.
The other thing is that because toilet paper takes up a huge space on a shelf, right? It doesn't take long for that to go bare, right? Because really there's only like 7 packages on a shelf. So because people were buying it and the shelf was empty, even though there was some in the back, it was creating this perceived a scarcity issue. And so people just saw the bare shelf and was like, there's no more. And so then they went in the back and they got all that, and they thought, I better buy 6 of them now because there's a scarcity on the shelf. So exactly.
It's the whole mentality. If everybody started grabbing tomatoes, everybody else would grab tomatoes, because they're like, why is everybody grabbing tomatoes? If somebody started staring up in the sky and pointing, everybody would stop and start staring up in the sky. It's like people follow people, right? They don't have the logic sometimes. But again, going back to the preparedness side of this, why not get it ahead of time?
Right.
Why not buy it for $1 today, then $10 tomorrow?
Yep.
Right. Why don't you get it cheap while it's cheap and just store it up? Toilet paper isn't going to go bad.
Absolutely.
So why don't you just get a bunch of it, right?
Yep.
And so that's the idea. Now, meet your other needs is step number 5. Meet your other needs. Again, they're needs. You need them, but it's a whole different psyche than food and water, those are the most important things for emergency preparedness. Food and water are the most important thing for a long-term emergency, period. Does that make sense?
Yep, absolutely. It does.
Now we're going to get to prep step number 6, or number 6 preparedness step. That is one that nobody really talks about in their preparedness courses. Very few people talk about it. And so number 6 is maintaining your standard of living. That's where I talk about silver. That's where I talk about buying extra supplies. That's where I talk about, rainy day funds, or talk about trading. Because in all reality, in fact, I'll give you a little insight. People say, well, what would I trade during an emergency? And it's really simple. What do you need to survive during an emergency? All the stuff I teach in preps, in steps number 1 through 6, right? All the stuff I talk about that you should store up are the same things that other people are going to need during emergencies. If you need it, they need it. So
Right.
if you buy extra, great. And guess what? You can trade it during an emergency because other people are going to need it also. And so
Right.
it's not complicated to figure out what you should store up to trade. So it's really easy. Now that's number 6, and I go into how to maintain your standard of living, because it doesn't make sense to have a whole room full of supplies and everything else, but then you get kicked out of your house and you're on the street, and where do you put your stuff, right? You got to know how to protect your standard of living, right? And so the last thing is number 7. Preparation step number 7 is helping others prepare. If you don't help others prepare, you're in trouble. And you're only as prepared as your neighbors are. If your house is the only one on the street that has the lights on, if your house is the only one on the street where your kids are fat and happy and laughing and playing, and everybody else is suffering and dying, okay, if your house is the only one with food on the table, okay, it's not going to be long before people start saying it's not fair, you have food and my kids are dying, right?
Right.
People go crazy.
Yeah.
And you do not know who's going to go crazy. You might think you know your neighbor. You might think they're the calmest, kindest, most charitable person in the world, but you haven't seen them under pressure yet. You haven't seen them in a place where they're desperate and where they have to choose between your kids or their care or their kids, right?
And see,
And
here's
so,
the sad thing. We saw it. It's not like we haven't had warning shots across the bow on this.
yeah,
That guy I was telling you about with Katrina, he said it took 3 meals. And that's the average American family.
yep,
Any family is about 3 meals away from being without food.
yeah,
And this is his words, not mine. In 3 days, you saw the veneer of civilization ripped away from an entire metroplex in New Orleans.
absolutely.
3 days.
You're always 72 hours away from a riot.
Yep. It doesn't take long. The average American family is not prepared to take some abuse as far as an emergency. We're just not.
You're absolutely right. That's the 7 steps. I mean, I can go on literally for hours like we did, but
No, you're good.
I had no clue we were at 2 hours already. That's amazing to me.
Yeah, it goes quick. Let's do this before we wrap up. Tell me about the challenge coming up. Tell my listeners where they can go to find that challenge, and also I will post the link when I release this podcast on that.
I'll get you a link. It's a 5-day preparedness challenge. I'll get you a link so you can put it on there. It's a preparednesschallenge.com, but I'm going to get you a link so you can have it. So just click on the link wherever you post it, and that'll go right to the right page. We're still finishing up the programming of it. We should be done hopefully this next week. So I'll get you that, and it should work just perfectly fine. If there's any problems, just write to me and let me know, but it should be working perfectly fine. I'm going to be teaching for 5 days. I'm going to teach people how to do the 7 steps of preparedness. I gave you a little taste of it, but I'm going to go more in depth on each one so people understand a ton of stuff. My goal is to help 10,000 families get prepared. That's my big goal. Right now, this has become a mission of mine. Remember, I told you I'm not money motivated. It just has never been something for me. I really can care less. But I love helping people, and I love projects. And so right now we've been gearing up in my warehouse. I'm buying new equipment to be able to do millions of cans of food. And you want cans of food, right? By the way, you don't want Mylar pouches and all that stuff. You want cans of food. That's the best way to go. And so we spend the money for cans because that's the right way to do it. And so we're gearing up with millions of dollars worth of food to be able to prepare for this challenge right now. And the goal is to be able to help a ton of families, 10,000 families, get prepared within 90 days each. Okay. And so that starts with this 5-day challenge where I teach them what to do. Okay. And then I tell them what products to get. Then I give them discounts on the products so they can save money. I do all this stuff to be able to help the families get prepared. My goal is in the next year to be able to look back and know that I helped 10,000 families get prepared. And hopefully those 10,000 families, even if I see zero money from it, help another 10,000, help another 10,000, help another 10,000. And hopefully there's a ripple effect that touches millions and millions of people to help them prepare for emergencies. All right. Well, but that's it. I'll give you some information. My goal is to literally help out a ton of people. I've got a bunch of my team is gearing up for this to be able to answer questions, help people. That's our goal. We feel like some really tough times are going to be coming, and my mission, my personal mission, my full-time personal mission is to help as many good families as I can to prepare for the tough times that are coming and for the return of Jesus Christ, which again, it's the great and terrible, right? The good and the bad.
Right.
We got to prepare for both, and that's physically, spiritually, in all ways, right? Let's be part of the five virgins, not the other five, right? But
Absolutely.
five that were ready. And just one little more point. I was reading through Joseph Smith Matthew just recently, and it's interesting. It talks about the good servant and the evil servant. The difference between the two is the good servant prepared the evil servant.
Right. Yep.
And so whether that's spiritually, physically, whatever it is, let's be part of the five.
Absolutely. So before we go, I just want to recap here so people know where to go and what to do. Go to MormonRenegade.com, or if you listen on Anchor or whatever it is you're listening on, go to the episode number 42, Let's Get Prepared with Marcello Surjopolos. At the bottom of the description of this podcast is a link. Click on that link and that will take you to the sign-up page for the 5-day preparedness course. For $17, you get all 5 days with Marcello where he breaks down these principles of being prepared. Now, you can also sign up for a different option, which is $47, which gives you the ability to receive the audio and visual recording of the 5-day preparedness course, and also an extra Q&A session with Marcello, so you can pick the brain of an expert. Marcello, you're a rock star. I so enjoyed having you on, man. I'd love to have you back on again. And I tell all my guests this. If you've been on once, you got a standing invitation to come back on anytime you want. You just need to let me know and we'll make the time. But awesome. Yeah, absolutely. Folks, something is coming. I can't tell you exactly what it is, when it's going to get here, but something's coming. Spend the time now to prepare. Look, Christmas is right around the corner. And I have adult children and I don't get them crap any longer, right? I give them food storage stuff. I give them things that can last. The thing Marcello's talking about with these courses and preparing, that is perfect. Get your loved ones something that can sustain them. Marcello, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you being here. Let's do this again sooner than later.
That'd be awesome.
Awesome.
Yeah, let's help more families. Let's do that.
Absolutely. Let's do that. All right. Bye, everybody.